Hi everyone, I just want to go through a quick kind of solution video to this Fibonacci project that we worked on. Hopefully you're able to figure it out. If not, hopefully this provides you just a little bit of an insight to, how to understand it. So there really are two different ways to solve this Fibonacci and make the Fibonacci sequence. The first here is a recursive algorithm, which just means one algorithm calls itself multiple times. So if we're just gonna step through this code that we wrote right here, we're gonna call our Fibonacci function, which is necessary for the recursive implementation, and we're gonna go a certain intervals deep. This is going to return, if we put 1 there, it's gonna return the first, item or the first number in the Fibonacci sequence. If you do the fifth number, it'll return the fifth number of the Fibonacci sequence. So I'm actually going to jump down to what happens most of the time when it's not 0, 1, or 2. It's going to return Fibonacci of the item before it and the item 2 before it. Does that make sense? So if we call Fibonacci of 7, it's going to take Fibonacci of 6 and Fibonacci of 5 and then add them together and return that value. Now that's good and all, that's what the Fibonacci sequence is, but we need kind of a starting value for these Fibonacci numbers, because it's going to keep going down and down and down, and what happens when it gets to 0 and 1 and 2. So what we have to do is say, first of all, if the iterations are lower than 0, which it is not, the Fibonacci starts at the first number. We're defining the start of it as 1. So if someone asked for 0, which we would say isn't a valid thing, we're actually just going to return negative 1, because that's something that you can say if it's a negative number, something went wrong within the code. So we're just doing that for sake. You could very easily not include this and still have something that works most of the time. But if we're moving down to really our starting conditions, I guess, so when it gets down to 1, it's going to return 0, and when it gets down to 2, it's going to return 1. It's kind of self-explanatory, but you might have to think about it a little bit. When you go all the way down to that first number there, that'll be the start of the Fibonacci sequence, and vice versa. Likewise for the second number, it will always be 1 in the sequence, and then it builds from there just with this little function here. And then we can go ahead and run it, and this will just ask us for some input, and then it'll print it out. So I'm going to start off with 0, and of course it's going to return a negative number and say something went wrong. This list right here, that's the bottom one that we'll talk about in just a second. Run it again. We do the first one is 0 as expected, and then we'll ask for the second item. It's also 1, and the third item should also be 1. Fourth item should be 2. Alright, and just fast here, 3, 5, 8, and let's go big, like 20. And our two methods agree. So that's for the recursive implementation. That's what comes to my mind first, but there is a different way to do it. That's actually smarter from a computer standpoint, but for the most part, we don't have to worry about that right now. So the thing is, when we run this code, this function is going to be ran so many times. It's going to be ran once when we first call it, and then if it's 8, it's going to be ran on 6 and 7, and then 7 is going to call 5 and 6, and 6 is going to call 4 and 5. So that's you're running the function for 5, which will already be ran. So you're making this function run twice or more than you need to, effectively doubling or making it a lot more efficient. So the way you can, combat that is you kind of store that value of the Fibonacci sequence as soon as you generate it. So what we can do here is we create a list with the first two numbers and say, just skipping down here, we're going to look at this list and we're going to take the two last numbers and add them together. That is how we can think about this. And then we're going to add that to the end of the list. So you probably saw it being ran here before, but it does like a very similar thing to this top one, except instead of printing out one by one, it's going to add it to the list and print out the entire list, and it's going to go to that same number that we asked it to go to at the beginning. But I'm actually just going to go ahead and say go to the 10th one, because we can see every stored value along the process. So I don't know. This is the first video. I don't know if we'll go more in depth, less in depth for future ones, but if you have any feedbacks or comments, please let us know. We're happy to change things, tailor things into whatever you guys think will work best for you. All right, thank you. Have holidays.